In this video, I'm going to do a review about some of the things that we've talked about with regards to the respiratory system, and then we're going to talk about some pathologies related to the respiratory system. We'll start off with the review. So let's pretend you are experiencing hypercapnia. First thing we need to do is remember what hypercapnia is. Hyper means increased, and capnia is referring to carbon dioxide levels. So we have increased carbon dioxide levels in the body, specifically in the blood. This means there has been an increase in carbon dioxide gas levels, and what's happened to pH? If carbon dioxide levels go up, pH goes down. Chemoreceptors in the carotid arteries and aortic arch, maybe medulla oblongata, can detect this and send signals to the respiratory center. What should the corrective response be from the respiratory center? So the respiratory center is going to send signals down to the lungs doing what? Go ahead and pause the video, formulate your answer, and come back and see if you got it right. So our problem is we have way too much carbon dioxide and our pH is becoming very acidic. We need to get rid of this carbon dioxide. How do we get rid of the carbon dioxide? We need to breathe more. The more we breathe, the more carbon dioxide we will expel. These chemoreceptors, when they tell the respiratory center that we have hypercapnia, the respiratory center will then send signals to the diaphragm and intercostals, increasing the rate and depth of breathing to help us get rid of this extra carbon dioxide and bring our blood pH back up to set point. But what if we had hypocapnia? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can fill in the blanks and then come up with the correct corrective response. If we have hypocapnia, this means there has been a decrease in carbon dioxide levels in our body fluids. When CO2 levels decrease, the blood becomes more alkaline, meaning the pH has increased. The chemoreceptors detect this increase in pH and send signals to the respiratory centers. The respiratory centers need to send signals to the diaphragm and intercostals, decreasing the rate and depth of breathing because we need to retain more carbon dioxide. We don't have enough carbon dioxide. We need to retain that carbon dioxide in our body, and we can do this by decreasing the rate and depth of breathing. The slower the rate and depth of breathing, the more carbon dioxide we can retain inside our body. Now let's take a look at a few selected respiratory disorders. We've talked about asthma in some of our other videos in the respiratory system section. Some of the characteristics of asthma include inflammation of bronchi. When we talk about inflammation of the bronchi, we have swelling that's occurring, and we have extra mast cells, and we have extra mucus. Another characteristic of asthma is bronchoconstriction. So we get activation of the smooth muscles that are in the walls of our bronchi. And when those smooth muscles are contracting, they squeeze on the bronchi, narrowing the lumen of the bronchi, making it harder to breathe. So asthma can be characterized by coughing and wheezing due to these issues with the bronchi. Some forms of asthma are acute, meaning they're sudden and severe. So an example of acute asthma would be allergic asthma. So if someone has an asthma attack due to an allergen. When this occurs, what's happening is we're getting a lot of histamine being released, causing lots of bronchoconstriction and lots of inflammation. Some forms of asthma are more chronic, and both can be often treated in similar ways. There are two main treatments for asthma: beta agonists and steroids. Beta agonists are compounds that bind to adrenergic beta receptors. And if your brain's going, what the heck is that, right? Adrenergic means a receptor that can bind to epinephrine or norepinephrine. There are different types of receptors that can bind to epinephrine and norepinephrine. We have alpha adrenergic receptors and beta adrenergic receptors as examples. The smooth muscle cells of the bronchi contain beta adrenergic receptors. And when they bind to epinephrine, norepinephrine, or a similar compound, it causes relaxation of the smooth muscle. So these beta agonists can decrease that constriction, relaxing those smooth muscles, making the lumen of the bronchi larger. Steroids are also used to treat asthma, and steroids reduce inflammation. By reducing the inflammation, we are going to increase the diameter of the lumen of the bronchi, making it so that more air can flow. COPD, it's not COPD, we call it COPD. COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Chronic meaning it's always there. Obstructive, I think that one's pretty obvious. We are obstructing the airways. Pulmonary is referring to the lungs, and then disease, of course, means something has gone wrong. Basically, COPD is a combination of two other disorders. It's chronic bronchitis with emphysema. Emphysema is reduced respiratory membranes, and bronchitis is inflammation of the bronchi. So when you have both of these things together, we consider it COPD. This is different than asthma because COPD is not reversible. Asthma is reversible. COPD also normally progressively gets worse and worse and worse, whereas a lot of people actually can outgrow asthma. However, the treatments for COPD and asthma are very similar. Like asthma, we treat COPD with beta agonists and with steroids. In addition to that, we add in often oxygen gas, which helps to increase the oxygen saturation in their bloodstream. That emphysema, that reduced respiratory membrane, really makes it very hard to get oxygen into the blood. So having a higher level of oxygen entering into the alveoli of the lungs means that we have a stronger diffusion gradient for the oxygen to diffuse into the blood, and we can get more oxygen into the blood. Cystic fibrosis is caused by a gene mutation. This gene normally produces a chloride ion transporter that has the job of transporting chloride ions into and out of cells. Because the gene is mutated, the chloride ion transporter is not made properly, and this results in an excess amount of salt building up outside of cells, especially the cells making up the epithelial tissue of mucous membranes. This high salt level on the outside of the mucous membrane means the mucus is going to be extra sticky and extra thick. This makes it really hard to breathe. Not only that, but this high salt environment can actually deactivate certain defensive proteins our body uses, like defensins, making it so that these people are more susceptible to infection. On the bottom of the screen, we can see an example of a properly functioning chloride ion transporter and then one that's malfunctioning. And you can see how the malfunctioning chloride ion transporter results in an excess amount of chloride ions and then hence salt building up on the outside of the cells. The X-ray is actually showing you an X-ray of the thoracic cavity, and it looks like there's clouds, fluff all over the place. That should not be there. All of that stuff that looks like fluff is mucus. That thick, sticky mucus that makes it very hard to breathe. Of course, a discussion on respiratory system disorders wouldn't be complete without talking about lung cancer. One important thing to understand about lung cancer is that 90% of lung cancers are preventable. Of course, because the number one cause of lung cancer is smoking, right? So how do we prevent lung cancer? Don't smoke? That'll work, right? But why does smoking cause cancer, right? Why does that happen? Turns out there's a high level of carcinogens or cancer-causing agents inside of cigarette smoke. And these carcinogens damage the DNA in our lung cells, causing them to become cancerous. When a cell becomes cancerous, it replicates in an unrestricted, unrestrained manner. In addition to that, the cell is like a non-functioning normal cell anymore. So you get tons of these cells that don't actually do anything for you. This group of cells is referred to as a tumor. As the tumors grow, they compress the airways and can cause parts of the lungs to collapse. Obviously, that's problematic for the respiratory system. Another problem here, though, is that lung cancers are usually highly metastatic, meaning they shed off tumor cells that go and end up growing in other places of the body.